The Avengers vs. the Peter Factor by midnightwolf2192. Chapter 33. Daredevil. Peter knew better than to cross into Hell's Kitchen. Hell's Kitchen was the Daredevil's territory. But he was just so angry, and once he started swinging, he couldn't stop. Peter knew his dad had simply been scared for him, but that didn't make the words hurt any less. Flashback. Stark is gonna kill us, Sam commented from his seat across from Peter on the Quinjet. He, Bucky, Peter and Clint were returning for what should have been a simple recon mission for S.H.I.E.L.D. The mission had been simple. Bust into the Hydra base, steal the data, and leave. The base was supposed to only have a skeleton crew on. When the small group had arrived, however, they found the base was fully occupied by Hydra agents. Sure, they'd managed to get the information they needed, but Peter had been wounded in the ensuing fight. Scratch that! Pepper, Tasha and May will kill us, and then Stark will bring us back for him, and your demon cat and Nebula will have a go on. It's not that bad, Peter hissed through clenched teeth as Bucky pressed a gauze pad to the bullet wound in his stomach. Bucky let out a snort and Peter hissed again. It's not! I've been shot before. Not helping matters, Spark, Clint called from the pilot's chair. He was coordinating with Helen as he flew towards Stark Tower, and he knew exactly what kind of shitstorm was awaiting them. Peter hadn't been in his Iron Spider suit for this mission, as he and Tony had been running diagnostics on it. That information meant he was slightly more susceptible to bullet wounds. You and I can both run faster than Stark, Bucky commented to Sam as he continued to fuss over Peter's wounds. He didn't think there were any bullets still in Peter, but he wasn't a doctor. It's Nat and Neb we should be most worried about. Pepper and May will just hit out on us. The other two will actively hunt us down. Guys, Peter interrupted, drawing the attention back to him. His face was contorted in pain, and Bucky swore under his breath in Russian. I don't mean to interrupt, but the bullet holes are kind of burning. I'm assuming that's not a good sign. Clint pushed the jet to fly faster while Bucky and Sam encouraged Peter to lie down. Sure enough, the entrance wound on one of the bullet holes looked like it was being eaten away by something. Sam grabbed as much saline as he could from the first aid kits and swore as he and Bucky worked to flush out the wounds. Tell Helen! Some form of chemical on the bullets! Sam called over his shoulder to Clint. Clint relayed the information to Helen urgently. Eating away at the skin. Unknown what it's doing inside. Hang on, punk, Bucky said as Peter took hold of his metal hand and squeezed it. We're almost at the tower. Just hold on. The jet soon landed at the tower, and just as predicted, the Avengers were waiting alongside the medical team. Tony let out a wounded noise as Bucky carried Peter off of the jet and placed him on the waiting gurney. Helen began barking orders to her team as they made their way back into the tower. Tony, Pepper, May and Nebula following close behind. Natasha and Steve rounding on the three men who all shrunk back in fear. When Nat had you pinned with her laser eyes, you tried to hide. What's happened? Demanded the former spy. The intel was wrong, Clint said, stepping forward to stand eye to eye with his friend. When we got there, the base was full of agents. Peter got the information we were after, but he jumped in front of a few bullets aimed my way. Where did Fury get the intel from? Nat now rounded on Steve, who threw his hands up in supplication. I don't know, but he's going to be furious. No pun intended. Steve commented. The Avengers made their way off of the landing pad and headed for the infirmary. Tony was pacing outside the closed doors, while May and Pepper held one another's hands tightly. Nebula was playing on with the circuits in her arm, something she only did when she was stressed. The Lothamoid's head snapped up as the doors opened, and she quickly got to her feet. She stormed towards Bucky, and the man held a hand out to stop her. Peter jumped in front of the bullets meant for Barton, Bucky said before Nebula could open her mouth. The base was more occupied than we expected. Intel suggested only a skeleton crew, otherwise we would have taken more people. Then Fury will face me, Nebula commented, turning on her heel and returning to her spot across from the closed doors. After 3 hours, the doors to the medbay opened and Helen walked out. Tony and Nebula instantly approached the woman, who simply held a hand up to slow down their descent. "He's fine." Helen preempted the questions, and everyone in the waiting room breathed a sigh of relief. "Bucky and Sam did a good job flushing out the wounds. The bullets appeared to be coated with hydrofluoric acid, which was eating away at Peter's body. Once we were able to flush out every wound and hook him up to some IV fluids, his natural healing took over." "Thank you, Helen," said May with a relieved smile. "Can we see him?" "Of course, but don't overstress him. I want him to finish the current bag of fluids before I release him," Helen said, and the group nodded. Tony and Nebula were the first through the doors, and when the others reached Peter's bed, Nebula was already curled up beside the teen, while Tony ran his fingers through the boy's hair. "I'm all right," Peter was repeating to a growling Nebula. "Besides, we got the information and Uncle Clint didn't get shot. It's a win-win situation." End flashback. Peter had thought everything was fine after that. He still trained with the others, once he'd received clearance from Helen, and he, Helen, and Bruce began working on a web fluid serum that could be used for medical properties, essentially trying to develop a hybrid between the web fluid and Helen's cradle technology. But in all the time Peter was spending in the lab, Tony was refusing to make eye contact with him. "Dad," Peter had said, managing to corner Tony in his lab. The man was hunched over his work table, Peter's iron spider suit laid out across it. Peter noticed Tony had tensed up when the boy called his name, but didn't answer. "Are you mad at me?" "What? Why would I be mad?" Tony spun in his chair and stared at the teen. "It's just, you've barely spoken to me since the mission," Peter said, and Tony turned back to his work. "I thought you were mad at me." "Not mad, just busy," Tony commented. "I've been working on your suit." "Without me?" Peter felt hurt at the idea that Tony would be working on the suit without him. That had always been their thing. "What have you done?" "I've rearranged the training wheels protocol," Tony said matter-of-factly, and Peter froze. "I've also added an escape feature. The second your suit registers an injury, you will be removed from the situation." "Dad, come on!" Peter couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Training wheels? No way. That's a bit overkill, isn't it?" "No!" Tony yelled. Actually yelled at Peter. The man spun on his seat, and Peter noticed the look of pure desperation on his face. "You're not ready yet, so you will go back onto training wheels. And I've sent a missive to Eye Patch. No more missions for you." "That's ridiculous!" Peter cried, and Tony frowned. "Come on, Dad. This was one accident. I didn't want Uncle Clint to get hurt. This is stupid." "No, Peter. You're stupid if you think I'm letting you run around on the streets of New York without these protocols in place," Tony hissed, and Peter's heart sank. "If you can't agree to this, then no more Spider-Man. Ever." Peter felt his soul leave his body as Tony's words sunk in. He stared at his father in stunned silence as he processed everything Tony had said. Not only had he called Peter stupid, he was threatening to take Spider-Man away from him again for something that wasn't even his fault. "What's going on in here?" Pepper's shocked voice broke Peter from his trance, and he noticed that he had been clutching his mug of hot chocolate so hard it had shattered in his hand. The ceramic had cut into his hand, but Peter didn't notice the blood or scalding liquid running down his skin. His mind was firmly locked onto the words his father had said. "Pete." Tony's words were soft, as if he'd only just realized what he had said. Peter ignored both adults, spun on his heel, and bolted from the lab. Ignoring the elevator, he scaled the stairs to the penthouse. After grabbing his spare suit, and after disabling Karen, Peter launched himself from his bedroom window and headed deep into the city. That led to now. He was deep in the Daredevil's territory, but he couldn't find it in himself to care. Night had fallen. so there was no doubt the devil would be out and about. But again, Peter couldn't care any less than he currently did. He knew that Tony and the others would be trying to contact him, but Peter had left his phone behind, so it would be harder for them to track him down. Peter just needed some space. He landed on the roof of a building and stared out over the city. He knew Tony cared, but Peter had been really hurt by his words. "You're a long way from home." A gravelly voice from behind him had Peter turning his head slightly. He had heard the devil land on the building, but hadn't moved. Peter had seen what Daredevil did to his bad guys. He didn't want to accidentally set the other vigilante off. "Needed some space," Peter replied. "I've got no plans to encroach on your territory." "You alright?" Daredevil asked as he walked closer to the other vigilante. Matt was well aware of Spider-Man. Other than Foggy and Karen simply adoring the other vigilante, Matt had a few clients who had also been helped by the other man, and so was aware he was on the younger side, and Matt didn't even need sight to tell that the other vigilante was radiating pain. Normally Spider-Man never shut up, but now he was silent. "Something's off about you. What is it?" "Nothing," Peter replied, and Matt moved to sit beside him. "Really, it's nothing." "Mm-hmm. Then why did your heart just swing?" Matt said, and Peter jumped. Peter swung around to look properly at the man and frowned under his mask. "You're staring at me and frowning. Plus, your heart rate just increased." "How do you know that?" Peter asked, curiosity winning out. "I can hear your heartbeat. Now stop ignoring my question." "Normally, you can't shut up," Matt replied, and Peter snickered softly. "Come on, Spider-Man. If you can't confess to New York's resident devil, who can you confess to?" "There's a church down that way." Peter snarked back, and Matt let out a bark of laughter. Surely someone there would listen to my confession. "Father Michael is a good man," Matt replied, his heart hurting slightly at the memory of Father Paul. "Sister Margaret Grace is also quite a good listener." "Do people still attend confession?" Peter asked, and Matt raised an eyebrow. "I mean, I don't know much about church. Aunt May is Catholic, but Uncle Ben and my dad were Jewish. That's how I was raised. Do people still go to confession?" "They do," Matt responded, and Spider-Man nodded. "In tough times. It's nice to have something familiar. But you're deflecting again." Peter said before trailing off. Matt and the young vigilante sat in silence for a time, while Peter processed his thoughts. "I got into a fight with Mr. Stark. Well, I wouldn't really call it a fight. He yelled, and I ran." Matt said softly, allowing Peter time to speak. "I know he's scared, and I know he loves me," Peter added, picking up steam. "But his words cut me. He threatened to take Spider-Man away from me. He did that once and it ended up badly. I had a goddamn warehouse dropped on me when he took my Spider-Man suit away last time. He swore he'd never do that again. And besides, what was I supposed to do? If Clint had taken the hit, he would have died. I heal. He doesn't. He has a wife and kids to take care of." Matt allowed the teenager time to rant, interjecting with a noise of support every so often. As the kids spoke, Matt moved closer so he was sitting beside the boy. Spider-Man unconsciously leaned into Matt, and the lawyer allowed it to happen. I wish he wouldn't threaten me with that," Peter said, the fight rushing out of him. Peter slumped further into Matt's side before tensing and trying to pull away. "Whoa, sorry, man. I'll give you your space." Now, Matt wasn't one for children, but something about this kid was calling to him. Matt placed a hand gently around Spider-Man's shoulders and squeezed him gently. The boy let out a breath, and Matt could hear him shuffling around to get comfortable. "You need it," Matt replied. Spider-Man nodded. "Now, I'm sure Stark didn't mean to hurt you. Most of the time, our anger stems from a place of fear. I am not condoning him for threatening to take your suit away. And believe me, I'll want to hear about the warehouse story one of these days. But I have to admit, I can understand where he is coming from. Have you hurt people you loved? Spider-Man's voice was soft, and Matt tensed slightly. As the boy began to backtrack, Matt nodded his head. I did. I said things that hurt them, mostly because I was terrified for their safety. In the long run, it never made anything better, Matt replied. The two fell into companionable silence, and Matt relaxed as the teen's heart rate began to settle, and his body began to lose some of its tension. After 15 minutes, Matt poked Peter in the shoulder. Well, since you're here, Matt said, pulling away from Peter and standing up. Let's patrol. Let's give the citizens of the kitchen something to really gawk at. Matt heard the kid climb to his feet as he jumped from the roof. Matt could hear Spider-Man firing off a web and following him. At Avengers Tower. Why did you say that to him? Natasha demanded of Tony, once the Avengers had been filled in on the situation. Nebula had come looking for Peter, and had found Pepper ripping Tony a new one in the lab. Pepper had then dragged the man up to the penthouse and called for the others to join them. The Avengers took turns yelling at Tony, but the man just remained silent throughout the berating. He was hunched over in a chair, with his head buried in his hands, while he listened to the team yell, God, Nat, I don't know! Tony yelled back before slumping down in his chair. I don't know. I would never do it. Not again. Has Peter ever told you what happened last time you took his suit off him? Nebula interjected before Nat could snap back at Tony. When Tony and the other Avengers shook their heads, Nebula continued, He told me about the Vulture. Peter tracked him down on the night your plane was hijacked and confronted him. Toombs brought a building down on him. What? Pepper asked, her face turning white. Tony stared at the Lutherwoid with horror in his eyes. Peter lifted the building off himself and then took down your plane? Nebula finished, her eyes locked on Tony. All without a suit. Oh, kid, Tony said, burying his face in his hands. He gripped his hair, and as he tugged on the strands, the Avengers could only stare at him in shock. Tony, Clint said, moving over to the other man. Being a parent is the scariest thing ever. I can only imagine how it feels to be the parent of a superhero. But Peter is a good kid. The best. Come on. He didn't even tell you he was being bullied because he didn't want the bully to get in trouble. Yeah, man. The kid has matured so much on missions. Sam chimed in, Bucky nodding in agreement. This mission was just a freak accident. Up until that moment, he had been following the book. He listened to every direction and followed all orders. Him taking the bullets for Clint is simply the kid's nature. The best you can do, honey, is reinforce his suit. Pepper joined the conversation with a gentle smile towards her partner. Disable the extra precautions, but work with Peter to incorporate some form of protective padding in the suit. I'm sure Shuri would love a chance to work with you both on the suit. Peter is going to be Spider-Man with or without our support. We all know that. We need to be there to support him, not tear him down. I'm so bad at this, Tony said softly. May, who had remained silent up to this point, walked over and rested a hand on his knee. Tony looked up at her with tear-filled eyes. I called him stupid. He knows you didn't mean it, May replied. Ben did the same thing once. Peter tried to fix some sort of technology Ben needed for work, and then when he got zapped by it, he needed to go to the hospital to treat the burns. Ben said the same thing, and it was all out of fear. Peter forgave Ben, and I know he'll forgive you. Boss, sorry to interrupt. Friday's voice came over the speakers, and the Avengers all looked up. Peter has returned and is in his bedroom. There is someone else with him. Go, Pepper and May said, and Tony nodded. He swiped his hands over his face and made his way towards the teenager's room. Tony knocked on the door and only entered it once he heard Peter's voice call him in. Peter was sitting cross-legged on the bed, his mask in his hands, but it was the person sitting beside him that had Tony gaping. There, sitting on Peter's bed beside him, was the devil of Hell's Kitchen. How did Peter keep getting himself into these situations? Stark. The devil's voice was deep and grating on Tony's and turned to face him. Take care of him, or someone might just take him out from under you. Thanks, Mr. Devil, Peter said. Daredevil ruffled Peter's curls almost fondly and smiled. Not a problem, kid. Any time you're in the kitchen, stop by for a chat, the devil said, and Peter nodded. And if you ever get in any trouble, Nelson, Murdoch and Page are always open. Oh, and don't think I've forgotten about the warehouse you mentioned. We will be discussing that next time I see you. The devil waved before launching himself from Peter's window. Peter turned back to Tony, and the older man just sighed. Oh, kid, Tony said. He slowly approached the bed, and when Peter looked up at him, Tony rested a hand on his ruffled hair. I am so damn sorry. I never meant what I said. I know, Dad, Peter said, and Tony let out a sniffle before pulling the team into a tight hug. As the two men embraced, Friday added yet another check mark to the Peter Factor board. The Peter Factor 36, Avengers & Co. 0. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that. I know for a fact I did. I don't know much about Daredevil. I know he's blind and a lawyer, and he uses his extra senses in order to fight, which I find so inspirational. It's amazing. Oof. I'm agreeing with Clint on this one. Being a parent for a superhero, that must be hard. Anyway, I was fully expecting the last one to be an end of it, but nope, if there is more Peter Factor, I am there for it. As you guys know, I'm a massive fan of Midnight Wolf, and again, legend. I think your name is Bronte, right? Like the Bronte sisters? If that's true, then Bronte, you are an astounding writer. Thank you so much for the shout out last chapter. I know I fangirled about it, but I'm not even ashamed. I'm a massive fan. Anyway, guys, remember to like, comment and subscribe. Hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. And remember to have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you are in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye.